folks. I hope you're all safe and well. I hope you can hear me. Somebody could maybe say yes in the chat. That would be great. Thank you, Martin. It's always it's been one of these days with the video conferencing software. So very grateful that you fed back. Thanks all very much for joining us. My name is Alistair Irons. I'm the chair of the Northeast branch, the Newcastle branch for the BCS. I'm very pleased to welcome my friend and colleague Tony Pitchford, who's going to talk to us about digital apprenticeships. Scheduled for between 40 and 45 minutes for talking, and then some time for questions at the end. Please feel free to put any comments in the chat if questions that come to mind as we go through, and we can address those afterwards. So I'm going to be quiet and hand over to Tony. Tony.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and thank you very much for having me along this evening. So it's a real pleasure. I am going to keep my camera off. We just had a small technical glitch about 30 seconds before we were due to start, where my connection dropped a little bit. So we're just going to play it safe. I'll leave my camera off until the very, very end. If I do lose connection, I will fight tooth and nail to get straight back on. So apologies for the late start. My name is Tony Pitchford. I'm the key account manager here at BCS for apprenticeships. I've been working in digital apprenticeships now for about 15 years. I'm just going to run through a presentation tonight on some of the key changes to digital apprenticeships over the last 12 to 18 months, just to try and unpick and clarify what's happened within the digital apprenticeship market and what that means to you as employers, as people working in the sector. Now, I just want to I've put the agenda up there for you. I think most of you will have seen that from the invite to the call. This session won't focus too much on the definitions around what an apprenticeship is or how to go about putting a program together. There are some really interesting resources available, and I've put one or two of them on the right-hand side of the screen there for you. And I'm sure when the slides are sent out or the follow-up is made on the back of this, we can put these links. I'll make these links available to you. In fact, earlier on today, BCS actually published an article called "How to Take on an Apprentice." So that's kind of the ink is still wet on that one. If you are interested in how to take on an apprentice, that's a great starting point. It's a fantastic article for those employers, for those businesses who are looking to develop a new apprenticeship program from scratch. If you're a little bit more familiar, any of the apprenticeships standards that we talk about today can be found on the BCS Digital Apprenticeship website or on the IFATE website, and I'll show you a little bit of that later on. And there's an excellent guide on the government's own website. And I know that's not normally a sentence that you hear, but there is some excellent information available, including the Road to Quality Apprenticeships, which is a really, really simple guide on best practice when you are working with apprentices as employers and training providers. But the agenda there on the left is really just the focus of the session. And critically, what I want to really focus on is what were the changes to the digital apprenticeships and why they matter and how they benefit to your business. And that really kind of brings me to a point that a lot of endpoint assessment organizations like BCS kind of like to mention. And that is, you start with the end in mind. What does success look like? And to think about what success looks like, we need to look at what the challenge is at the moment. There are far better and cleverer people than I to talk about some of the situations, some of the issues that businesses face right now. But we are in a very much a candidate-driven hiring market. And you as employers know that more than anybody. Businesses need engaged, skilled workers, and it's becoming very difficult to find good people to bring on board. There are all sorts of horror stories about what's going on out in the hiring market, but as employers, you've effectively got a four kind of key strategies to develop your business at this moment in time. You can borrow staff, so you can bring people in through hiring temporary staff. You can get placements or secondments. You can bring in consultants, you can outsource your business, and that is a very quick way of bringing talent in, or engaging the talent that you need very quick, but often quite expensive and sometimes time consuming. Everybody knows you can go out to market, you can put an advert on Monster or Indeed, you can go out to market, you can buy an advert on LinkedIn, you can go out and buy the talent that you need. You can directly hire those people that have the right background, but more importantly, you want people not just with the right background, but with the potential to develop with your business and to grow with your business. That's where it's becoming increasingly difficult at the moment. And I hate the phrase, the Great Resignation, but there has been an impact post-COVID, post-lockdown, and it is a very candidate-driven market. And so finding the right people is becoming increasingly competitive. A lot of roles and a lot of tasks can be automated, and you can develop technology to kind of automate tasks. And again, that would reduce your urgent need for kind of immediate talent acquisition. Part of the problem is that also takes time, investment, and very careful planning. It's not easy to do. But in a lot of sectors, manufacturing, service sectors, we're seeing more and more automation going through. It's not available in every area, but it's a creeping kind of growth around automation. And we're seeing more and more of it in lots of different areas. The most sustainable form of growth, where the real sweet spot is in terms of developing your business and widening your talent acquisition, is around building. And building is around training and developing your own staff and putting in solid CPD strategies. That could include professional body membership. It could include joining BCS as a company, as an organization member. It could also look at include certified training programs, bringing trainers in, internal and external training. But building also includes recruiting people from programs like traineeships, digital boot camps, T-levels, apprenticeships, and graduate recruitment strategies. So all of those are kind of the aim to build your businesses up. And that's what we're going to be looking at today, building through apprenticeships. Again, we're looking at context here. The kind of first 3 points on this slide are taken from the government's own Levelling Up white paper, which many of you will have seen and read about and everything else. It does point to the fact that there is a significant digital skills gap within the northeast of England, and there's a lot, a lot of additional research that backs that up. We have a slightly aged population, and that age disparity is more acute when you realise that aging populations tend to have a kind of lower rate of digital skills overall. You can see in that top point there that we're starting from a low point in the northeast of a population with level 3 qualifications or above. And those apprenticeship starts in the final point on the screen there, although they look kind of particularly healthy, that is actually the lowest volume per head of population in the country. So we have a low base of apprenticeship starts in the northeast. The Levelling Up paper is key to all of this, because it does look at investment into skills and investment into the kind of technology that's going to support not just skills development, but business growth. I want to make it clear, I'm from the northeast. I've lived in the northeast for most of my life. It's not all doom and gloom. We know in this sector, the digital sector is incredibly well represented in the region. We have, large employers such as Accenture and Sage and others. We have some fantastic digital clusters around Sunderland Software City, or Holts Yard, or the Boho in Middlesbrough, for example. And we've also got groups, not just the BCS membership groups, but Dynamo and everything else with kind of great networking opportunities and collaborative approaches, as well as 3 or 4 really fantastic universities in the region, Sunderland, Teesside, and others with great reputations within the digital sector. It's not all in doom and gloom, but I want us to recognize that within this region, we are starting from a relatively low base, but we do have a lot of strengths that we can offer. And I think that's where the digital apprenticeships and growing digital apprenticeships within your organizations is a great way of developing key talent and securing that sustainability long term for your business and for the region. I did say we would touch on this. I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but just so that we've all got a nice kind of starting point for a definition of an apprenticeship, let's look what an apprenticeship is. The classic definition is that it's an apprenticeship is a job with training, and that's at its simplest, that is exactly what it is. Behind the scenes, you have government funding that supports the delivery of the apprenticeship, or it could be that your employer makes a small contribution depending on the size and scale of your business. They are available to anyone aged 16 or above who's eligible for an apprenticeship. So they're not just for school leavers. And I think it's something that kind of comes across more in the press than it does in conversations that we have with employers. Most employers understand that apprenticeships now are for everybody, but you still read those articles in the Daily Mail or the Times or the Guardian or whatever, and they pretty much all start with, "You'll never believe, but there was an apprentice who was actually 28 years old." Like it's as rare as duck's teeth. The average age of data analyst level 4 apprentices working with BCS at the moment is 33.5 years old. So the age profile of apprenticeships in the last 5 years has shifted from almost exclusively 16 to 18-year-olds to overwhelmingly being those people who are mid or early career and are looking to either make a career transition from one role into another, or are early enough in their career that they would benefit from the skills that are delivered as part of that apprenticeship. So they are very much being delivered and offered to existing members of staff. And what's important about this is that apprenticeships are linked to the job role itself. It doesn't matter if you're an English graduate or a history graduate who's now working as a business analyst, and the business analyst apprenticeship is level 4, you're not stepping backwards. What you're doing is you're doing an apprenticeship which is appropriate to the job that you are in. So they're not dependent on academic ability. It's very, very specifically mapped to the role that you're going to be doing as an apprentice, or that your colleagues will be delivering as apprenticeships. And as you know, the apprenticeships are, involve the training. Every apprenticeship includes 20% off the job training, so roughly 1 day a week over the duration of the apprenticeship program should be training in some way, shape, or form, and that is delivered or supervised by college or university. Some employers deliver their own apprenticeship programs, or they're delivered by private training providers. Private training providers account for about 70% of the total apprenticeship market in the UK at the moment. And where does BCS come in? We're an endpoint assessment organization. So we're independent of the employer and the training provider. I'll come back to this analogy a little bit, but think of it like taking a driving test. You work with your driving instructor for a period of time. They take you out on the roads. They help you prepare for your theory test and for your practical test. And you then go to a test center where you take your driving test and you sit your driving exam. That's what BCS does. We're independent of the instructors. We're independent of everything else that's delivered on program. Same for the universities. The people who assess within universities are independent of the delivery of training. So there's our broad definition of an apprenticeship. But there have been some really significant changes in the digital apprenticeships in the UK, in England, in the last 12 to 18 months. And that's what this is about and tonight's about. A little bit of background before I move on to the next slide here. Apprenticeships are put together and managed by a government quango called the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, commonly referred to as IFATE. IFATE implemented a review of the digital apprenticeships, which went live around 2015, 2016 and beyond. But they decided to carry out a review, and they published the intent to review in late 2017. They pulled together groups of employers known as trailblazers, and those trailblazers reviewed each standard independently of each other and came up with some recommendations. And those recommendations were finally published in June of last year, in June 2021. So this process started in late 2017, published in 2021. it was a long and a very confusing journey. And even while the original apprenticeship standards, the digital apprenticeship standards, were being reviewed, IFATE was pulling together new trailblazer groups who were developing new apprenticeship standards at the same time. So lots of things were happening and there were lots of moving parts. I'm going to try to explain this on one single slide. So this is where I'm rolling my sleeves up. Bear with me and let's see what we can do here. First thing to note is that some standards didn't change. You can see IT technical salesperson and IT solutions technician have not been looked at or reviewed. And there are two other standards you can see there, digital support technician, and one of our most popular standards, one of the most popular standards, not just in digital, but actually one of the most popular standards in England, the digital marketer level 3, that is currently under review. So that's kind of in the process of being reviewed by a trailblazer group. A handful of standards listed on that on the black arrow there were kind of revised and relaunched. They were basically rewritten, given new assessment plans, reshaped to fit in with other sectors. So they had their mandatory exams removed, were put into given a kind of refreshed assessment plan and were released. That they went live in June 2021. Some standards were retired, and of those, a couple were replaced by the cybersecurity technologist and the information communication technician at level 3. We've had new standards that BCS has already been approved for in the last 18 months. Of note, the DevOps level 4, the DevOps engineer level 4 is proving to be very, very popular. Not quite as popular as the data technician level 3. Anything to do with data at the moment seems to be red hot. The data analyst level 4 is now one of the most popular is the most popular digital apprenticeship standard, and has overtaken anything to do with the tech support roles at level 3 that historically have been the most popular standards for BCS. So data technician level 3 was brand new. That came out last year. Two standards were part of the original consultation launched in 2017. We still haven't had the outcome of that consultation yet. We're still waiting for a go live date on those two standards. So they are still operating in their original form. And soon, we don't know when, we'll have new versions of them. And on top of that, there are more standards coming through the pipeline. BCS is going through the process of making applications for digital accessibility specialist level 4, and there is a new game programmer at level 7. We haven't had any interest on that yet, either from training providers or from employers. So we're hanging fire on that one until we see the whites of its eyes, until we're approached by somebody who needs that particular apprenticeship standard. If you are still with me at this point, that was one hell of a slide. I hope you agree. There is an awful lot there. So I want to make one point, and I'm going to very briefly then ask Alistair if there are any questions or comments at this point. But I just want to make one very important point. The new standards and the revised versions of the original apprenticeship standards, I just want to make it clear that we do not regard them as any better or worse than their original counterparts. They're not better. They're assessed differently, but the content and the requirements of the apprenticeship standard and the level of work that is required to complete the revised versions and the new versions of the apprenticeship standards is still as demanding as the original versions. So I just want to make it clear that these aren't kind of new shiny improvements. It is a rewrite of the content that's out there. And I have focused on those apprenticeship standards that BCS worked with, but we'll touch on anything else that comes on the back of that. Alistair, was there anything that's come through or that you want to ask or comment on from at that point?
There's nothing come through on the chat, Tony, at the minute. So I think just keep going.
No problems at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try. Well, there you go. There's the simple version of what we've got now. These are the standards that BCS is the endpoint assessment organization for. These are the standards that we're working with employers and training providers, and we offer now. I will share these slides with Alistair and the team to circulate after this. And each of these if I just hover over, you'll see there's a live link against each of them, and that will take you to the details behind each of the standards. It is worth going through. If there is a standard on there that you hadn't thought of before, you might work in a development team, but you hadn't realized there was a DevOps engineer level 4 apprenticeship standard available. Have a look at the standard. It will give you an outline of the job description that the standard is designed to meet. It will also give you a link to the assessment plan, and I would encourage you to have a look at the assessment plans and to see exactly what it is that your apprentices would need to achieve as part and parcel of that program. So not a complete list, bear that in mind. That's a list of the standards that BCS offers. But there are other standards that we don't offer, including the degree apprenticeship programs. It's worth having a look at the IFATE website from there. As an apprentice goes through their program, they're building up a bank of knowledge. They're quite often building portfolios, working on projects, to meet the requirements of the assessment plan that is set out by the Trailblazer Group. So the assessment plan is the document that BCS works towards to say, this is at the end of the apprenticeship, this is what an apprentice should be able to demonstrate to anyone, particularly BCS as an independent endpoint assessment organization, or to their university assessors. They should be able to demonstrate that they've met the requirements of the apprenticeship standard through these methods outlined in the assessment plan. It's incredibly important that they are able to do this. So in each apprenticeship standard, you'll see these items listed, which are knowledge, skills, and behaviors. Fairly self-explanatory, but it's really important to understand that what we're actually assessing as an endpoint assessment organization is not a tick in the box. It's a demonstration of competency. And I've put a brief example together at the bottom here, which is based on the level 4 software development standard. So in the standard itself, it says that the apprentice should be able to describe the different roles and responsibilities involved in the software development lifecycle. And that's fine. The knowledge that you have is there, as an apprentice, you should be able to describe what that looks like. That's not what we're assessing. We're assessing the competency that knowledge gives the apprentice. And by that, we mean, how do those roles and responsibilities impact the project that they are required to do as part of their endpoint assessment? Who is involved? Who's given the work instruction? What influences the project? What influences the outcome of the project? How do those roles and responsibilities define what's coming through when they're delivering their project? So it is very much about the application of their knowledge, skills, and behaviors in the workplace that we're interested in. And again, let's look at this. Why does this matter? What's really important here is that these changes have moved from a kind of one-size-fits-all assessment model to something that is incredibly tailored and bespoke for you as the employer. Very simple analogy, going back to that kind of driving test analogy, rather than just asking everybody on the road to pass a driving test, regardless of what they're driving, we now have the equivalent of people riding scooters with a license that matches a scooter, having a motorcycle license, having a driver's license, having an HGV or a truck driving license, or the ability to be able to tow a caravan. All of those different categories have been assessed differently and independently of each other. And your apprentice is now demonstrating a set of skills that match the job role that they're in. So for you as employers, it's become even more critical that when you are looking at apprenticeships, that you're selecting the right apprenticeship standard. Again, a good example here is within tech support roles. There's now the information communication technician level 3. That's a kind of almost like a pure tech support role with some options attached to it. But you could also have people in similar roles doing the IT solutions technician level 3. There is also an argument that says one of the optional tracks within the digital support technician role overlaps with that. So you've got it really has to define, it really has to match the job description that you have and the role that you're putting them into. And you have to be very careful with that. So your training provider, your university will work very, very carefully with you to make sure that your job role meets the requirements of the apprenticeship standard. Because they are linked to that job role, there's kind of a little bit more that as employers you'd need to consider as well. In particular, it's the endpoint assessment methods. Some of the assessment methods now include projects that the apprentice will need to complete as part of the endpoint assessment, but that will be taken straight from the workplace. So for example, the DevOps engineer level 4, they have to complete a live project within a 12-week period and write that up and submit that project that project write-up to BCS. I think it's around 5,000 words that they need to complete. They have to write up the project they're working on. So it could be that it's 2 or 3 sprints that they're working through. They're writing those sprints up as part of their project, but those sprints need to meet the knowledge, skills, and behavior criteria that are set out in the assessment plan. So there's an awful lot for them to do there to make sure that the project they're working on is, intended to and can possibly meet all of the assessment criteria that we need to see as part of that endpoint assessment. So project design and workflow design to make sure your apprentice can possibly achieve everything they need to as part of the endpoint assessment is critical for a lot of the apprenticeship standards now. Not all of them, but some of them. This is all, every endpoint assessment is unique in its at the moment. So some of them, there will be projects or case studies that on work they've already completed. There'll be reviews of portfolios as part of a professional discussion. But there are apprenticeship standards out there that do demand work-based projects are completed as part of the endpoint assessment. So worth bearing that in mind. And while they're on program, the way that they'll be preparing for this is kind of a gradual build-up of their knowledge, skills, and behaviors, of their approach and their depth of knowledge, their application of those KSBs in the workplace, recording those activities. All of that has been mapped against membership with BCS. So as an apprentice, they are entitled to join BCS as an associate member for £15. So we've made it a reduced rate for apprentices because they're obviously in their early stages of their careers or in their career change. We've put an incentive on the table for BCS members to go at £15 for associate member. That can also be combined with what we call a Pluralsight package. So some of you may have come across Pluralsight. This is an e-learning platform with around 2,500 pieces of e-learning content on there. And for a BCS membership fee and a contribution from the training provider using your funding allocation, so it's no cost to you or the apprentice, you can pay your £15 BCS membership fee, but on top of that, your provider makes a contribution towards a Pluralsight license for 12 months. What we've done is we've mapped the knowledge, skills, and behaviors of each apprenticeship standard to e-learning content on Pluralsight. It's not intended to replace anything the training provider does, but it is there to complement the learning that they're doing. And it will all count towards their off-the-job training as part of their apprenticeship. So there's some on-program support that BCS offers through our membership channels. And obviously as associate members, hopefully you are all BCS members as well. The benefits that you get of BCS membership are all there at an associate level. So discounted books, membership of local chapters, local groups, special interest groups, and access to mentors, for example. So there's lots of things that associate members can benefit from that would really add an awful lot of value to their apprenticeship. Again, on this slide deck, there is a link in there to a short video from Pluralsight. I'm just going to kind of skip through that. I don't really want to play the video tonight, but it would be there as linked in, just in case you want to follow it up. Okay. The business case for putting an apprenticeship into your business, into your organization. There are lots and lots of case studies out there. There are lots and lots of facts and figures out there. I've pulled some of these from the quality apprenticeship roadmap that I referenced earlier on, that I've linked earlier on. But there's one point here that I've added in, which really stands out for me. Part of the challenge that we've got, going back to the challenge of kind of recruiting people, of finding those people, and the kind of strategic decisions around buy, build, borrow, or bot. If you're building, then you want to build a sustainable business, and that means opening up your talent pool as far as wide as possible to get the right people in. If they don't have the right background and right qualifications for you, then that build model just means that you have to find people with the right potential. And that exploring a wider talent pool is key to all of this. And I know we've all got the right kind of intentions in mind, but there's evidence coming through in lots of different areas, but in particular within what we're seeing here at BCS, that employers taking on apprentices are seeing some significant gains in the male to female ratio within the tech sector. So nearly a quarter of their population is female on apprenticeship programs, as opposed to 17% male to female, which is where 17% is where the industry has been for years, nearly a decade now. And some apprenticeship standards are more attractive to female applicants and cohorts than, or appear to be more attractive to female cohorts than others. Digital marketer, for example, is the only digital standard to have over 50% of its population as female. I'm using female in the sense that it's declared on the funding forms that the government use. So I just want to make that clear. It's male, female, other, or not declared on the application form. So we have limited data as to kind of non-binary and others. So apologies just in advance, just to make that, I want to make that clear. I'm working with the data that we have. 52% female for digital marketer. Tech sales, business analyst, data analyst, and software developer all have between 30 to 35% female populations on the apprenticeship programs at the moment. So those are fantastic, kind of opportunities to increase a talent pool, to engage current staff into getting, moving people from finance into data analysts, for example, that kind of thing. These are really, really good opportunities to improve the gender balance within the tech sector, because goodness knows we really need to improve the gender balance within the tech sector, as we're all aware of it. If you are working with a university, if you're working with a good quality training provider or a college, they will have programs that are designed to help address some of the imbalance in the kind of that sector, in that area, whether that's LGBTQ plus programs, whether it's targeted programs towards ethnic or other underrepresented communities. Work with your training provider, engage with them and see what they can do to help with that. But I know it's part of a corporate social responsibility piece, but I really wanted to draw that out above and beyond any other business case. This is really, really important, and it's something we can all contribute to. And apprenticeships seem like a great lever to be able to pull to address the gender imbalance within tech. But let's get down to brass tacks. I'm working on a tool at the moment that looks at the return on investment for apprenticeships, and I wanted to give you a quick preview as to some of the work I've been doing behind the scenes on this. So this is a screenshot of this particular program I'm working on. What I've done is I've taken the typical hiring salary for a data analyst from IT Jobs Watch. That's the figures that I've got on this one were taken in December, so there might be some variation, but broadly that's the typical hiring salary for a data analyst. The model then looks at standard average hiring fees, pension contributions, national insurance contributions, travel expenses, training, any bonuses, the cost of having a desk in a room, that kind of thing, builds all of that together and gives you the true cost of hiring someone at £45,000 as a data analyst, which comes up to £75,000. And then you can see the data analyst level 4 apprentice. I've priced them at £15 an hour. The national minimum wage for an apprentice is actually £4.30 an hour, but as an employer, you are more than welcome to add to that. So this tool allows you to put in a salary that you think is much more appropriate for the kind of level and technology and job role that you're working towards. And that gives us a hiring figure, again, using the same calculations, but with some slight variance to it. For example, you don't have to make national insurance contributions in the first year for an apprentice. Pension contributions are lower, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see an apprentice at 30,000 comes out as a total cost per hire, just over £45,500. It's not all sweetness and light. We've got to bear in mind that 20% of that apprentice's time is going to be taken up as off-the-job training. So you can see there's a productivity piece here where that gap will never be closed until the apprentice has finally completed their endpoint assessment. So you're only going to get 80% productivity in theory on the back of that. And some of this line here around productivity, this curve here, could be addressed by front loading the training program that you're on. Again, that will depend on the training provider and universities and colleges you're working with. It may include taking people on from boot camps onto apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeship training programs. There could also be other strategies that you could consider, such as adding in early qualifications, early vendor qualifications, early certificates if you wanted to buy other training on top of the apprenticeship program commercially to help address that productivity kind of gap. But that's the model we're working on. From a return on investment point of view, if any of you are interested in looking at this further, this model is still in beta mode at the moment. I'm still working it through, but I'll be more than happy to jump on a call and work through it with you just to see whether or not you agree with the figures we're getting there, and to question and challenge the model, but also just to see whether or not your return on investment calculations match ours. I won't dwell on this too much, but again, just want to kind of reiterate, as an apprentice, working with BCS, they are entitled to, not just any apprentice, any apprentice on a digital standard would be entitled to join BCS at an associate member level. So they would start at associate, and obviously what we want to do is put them onto that journey to get them all the way through to chartered professional and move them up with that continuous personal development and lifelong learning strategy. And again, they get all of the benefits that you'd expect as a BCS member as an apprentice. On completion of their endpoint assessment, apprentices are entitled also to join BCS as a full member at a discounted rate, and that discounted rate will continue for the second year and then go to full price in their third year. But as part and parcel of their membership, we've built in a register for IT technicians as well. So that, again, I'm sure you're all going to be hopefully familiar with this as BCS members, but our IT tech is available to apprentices as well, with all of the benefits that comes with. What we've been looking at tonight is the changes to the apprenticeship programs that are out there and how they impact your business. I think just very broadly want to summarize that. What do apprenticeships do for you? Apprenticeships, I mean, hopefully you've seen there with the kind of beta tool of the return on investment calculator there. It's a huge return on investment, not without its cost. They're not fully productive until, in theory, again, they're not fully productive until they complete their apprenticeship. But there's also an investment in time and effort to get them up to speed. But there's a cost saving, a cold hard cost savings that will help you get that across the line, hopefully get that across the line with any of your finance team who might object to hiring apprentices. But that's where they're at. Most significantly, they're widening your talent pool. They're either offering you massive CPD opportunities within your own staff to put people onto an apprenticeship and develop their skills, or to bring new talent in from different backgrounds and build them up into your company culture. An apprentice is embedded in your company culture. They have to work hard to understand, as part of their knowledge, skills, and behaviors, your policies, your protocols, the why behind your how. And by understanding your why, they become further embedded in your corporate culture. It's a huge amount of evidence, again, on the government website, that apprenticeships increase retention, staff retention. Apprentices are very likely to stick around long term. So there's a lot of positives in and around your apprenticeship programs. And on top of that, on the right hand side, as you say, the aim is that we're going beyond the endpoint assessment and looking at how we go about developing those people from apprentices, from graduate apprentices, and you further and further, and take them on that professional membership journey and that continuous lifelong learning journey that comes with being part of BCS. One final point in there, you'll see that kind of little white box. It hasn't quite come out as clear as I would like it, but hopefully you can see that little white box there, the Federation for Informatics Professionals, FedIP. If anyone is on the call and they're working in the healthcare sector, we're busy behind the scenes mapping FedIP, the kind of RIT Tech equivalent in inverted commas within the healthcare sector, to the endpoint assessments for the revised versions of the standards. So again, the idea is that once an apprentice has completed endpoint assessment in a digital standard, that they would join FedIP at an appropriate level in the near future. And there'll be more on that from your BCS contacts. There's a lot in that. I do appreciate that that was a bit of a rattle through. So whether or not you have apprentices on board, I hope it's given you an insight into some of the recent changes in and what apprenticeships offer, and some food for thought on what apprenticeships could do to add value to your organisation. I'm going to pass back over to Alistair and see whether or not there's any questions or any comments or anything to follow up on there.
Thanks, Tony. That was absolutely fascinating. And, you know, taking us through a very complex and complicated environment in such an easy to understand way is no mean feat. So thank you very much for that.
And even worse, Alistair, I'm going to put my camera on, but I'm thankful that I have a couple of lights on my screen here, but the bulb blew in my room as I've been talking. So I do look like I've robbed my own house.
You can do shadow puppets in the background there as well.
So yeah, it's been a weird experience.
No, bless you. No, thank you so much. So I'll check the chat in a second. Really, one thing that strikes me, you know, in terms of getting people into the digital environment, and you know, we're trying desperately to get students to do stuff post 18 and go to FE college and
yes,
higher education. How are we just shuffling the deck chairs in a finite pool, or is the use of the inclusion of apprenticeships and moving on to you know, the qualifications you've talked about, is that increasing the number of people involved in the digital environment, or overall is it just the same?
Yeah, we're seeing significant amounts of growth in the digital apprenticeship sector. Alistair, it's a really good question. I think the use of apprenticeships in large organizations as part of a CPD strategy, I think is undeniable. And going back to that point about, you know, the average age of an apprentice doing data analyst at the moment is 33 and something. You know, that's a big leap from what was a 16 and a half, 17-year-old average starting age from 5-6 years ago, before the apprenticeship standards were launched. So we're seeing it as a significant, not just bringing people in from their own organization, but going out to people who are returning to work, people who've maybe been unemployed or made unemployed, and have come from a different sector, but have enough experience behind them to show potential and to go through these things. And there are some great programs, you know, the Digital Bootcamp Initiative, for example, that's showing very positive signs. Certainly the boot camps in the digital sector in comparison to boot camps in other sectors, have been incredibly successful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of growth there. And we're starting to see the outcome of those initial boot camps turn into and translate into starts on apprenticeship programs. So there's some really positive things happening in and around the apprenticeship sector. In terms of shuffling the decks, the link that I've put on the screen there for the Digital Skills Network is part and parcel of BCS's attempt to try and, not so much shuffle the decks around, but get them stacked in the right way first time, every time. Digital Skills Network came from a webinar that we ran with Gillian Keegan when she was Skills Minister. She was on a webinar with my colleague Annette Allmark. And Gillian Keegan admitted that the government, that the DFE didn't have a proper mechanism to engage employers to help them make the right decision, help the government make the right decision about where funding should be allocated in the digital sector and what kind of programs were working.
Yeah.
So we've pulled together the Digital Skills Network, and I would encourage anyone on the call to get involved in that, so that we can pool our relative resources together: training providers, universities, employers, members, charities, LEPs, all of these key stakeholders. And we have a kind of channel to go back to the DFE and talk to them about what it is that the digital sector needs. And they can then design, rather than designing programs as guesswork, we can then help shape that.
Yeah, fantastic. No, great. Thank you. Rubina's put a comment in the chat and said it seems like a significant growth. We see very few minority groups and those identifying as female coming through traditional vocational A-level and degrees, and these numbers are hugely encouraging. And that it was great. So many of us have tried in so many different ways to get females to engage, and those identifying as females coming through,
yes,
and not managed it. So is it what do you think is different about the apprentice offer that broadens the attraction for a wider range of participants?
Going back to the coalition government, the coalition government removed Connections Careers Advisory Services from schools. There was a ring-fenced protected service, and it then got absorbed into local authorities. So I think if we looked into that data further, we may find that some of this activity is in pockets where local authorities are a little bit more engaged in careers advice in schools and colleges. And I still think there's a case that we had a national careers service that does what Connections did. But that's by the by. The messaging in schools is much stronger than it used to be, and it has been reinforced in the last couple of weeks, in that schools and colleges are now obliged and can be penalised if they don't introduce young people to apprenticeship opportunities under what's called the Baker Clause, and broaden the careers advisory service that they're offering to their students and pupils. But most schools are already doing this. There are outliers, but most schools are already doing this in spades. So I think the message is coming through that apprenticeships are not, that.
Oh, I think you might have. Oh no. I have a horrible feeling that Tony's gone. Oh dear. Oh no, he's back. Are you back?
I think, Alistair, I might turn my camera off again just in case.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think perhaps losing the screen share that might do the trick.
Yes. Yeah.
So I suspect, without tempting the technology too much, are there any further questions from colleagues? So we don't have the ability to put the.
Sorry, I'm still here. I can hear you.
So I'm not getting any more questions, Tony. And on behalf of the group and the branch, I thank you very much for the really interesting talk tonight. and we look forward to working with you moving forward.